These are the Glorious Pandas. They are not Holy Pandas, but they get you an almost indistinguishable experience at a much lower price point. And surprise, surprise, more drama. If you didn't know, Glorious is quickly becoming known as a gaming company that is constantly looking to disrupt the gaming industry by providing high quality peripherals at a very competitive price. They started with mouse pads, had a brief stint with mechanical keyboards, but really made a name for themselves with the Model O and subsequent success of the Model O- and Model D line of mice. Well, now they are jumping back into the mechanical keyboard scene and attempting to make one of the most sought after switches, the Holy Pandas, not only more accessible, but more affordable as well. Now this context is important because coming into the release of the Glorious Panda, the company had built up a lot of goodwill with the community, which is why the community was so fired up when Glorious started teasing these switches, but unfortunately there have been a few missteps along the way. We're not going to get into all of the details, but the community not only took issue with Glorious calling their switches Glorious Holy Pandas when their switch didn't include the signature halo stem, which is what makes it holy in the first place, but when it came out that Glorious had filed a trademark on the Holy Panda name, well, all hell broke loose. Glorious ended up posting a very detailed apology on Reddit to address the community's concern and even issued an apology to Mike over at Novel Keys regarding some behind the scenes dealings when Glorious first started looking into developing their own Switch. Everything is fully detailed out in Glorious's Reddit post, so if you're interested in that kind of stuff, I'll have a bunch of links in the description box below. Now, before we take a look at these switches, there are some disclosures that we need to get out of the way. Glorious did send me these switches to do a video on, but I want to make it very clear that they don't have any input into what goes into this video, and they don't even get to see the video before it's posted. So with that out of the way, there's a lot to unpack with these switches, so let's get started. First, we have to talk about the packaging. This version still says Glorious Holy Panda, but because of the issues that we touched on earlier, the retail box has been revised to say Glorious Panda instead. When I first opened the shipment box, I was actually really surprised. These are hands down the best Switch packaging I've seen of any mechanical Switch that I've purchased. Pretty much every Switch that I've purchased has either come in a plastic bag, a generic plastic tub, or some sort of plain cardboard box. But this looks like something you'd actually see on a retail shelf and shares some of the same design language as Glorious's other products. When I first saw how flashy this package was, I had two thoughts. The first was, wow, this is awesome, because this kind of polish really elevates the product from a DIY hobby to something I could see parents picking up for the kids at Christmas at their local Best Buy. But the other side of me was a bit concerned because sometimes companies use this fancy packaging as a way to charge a premium for something that ultimately doesn't really matter. But fortunately, Glorious has kept with their price disrupting ways and will be selling 36 switches for $24.99 USD, which comes out to about 70 cents a switch, which is incredible. For context, Drop's Holy Panda is going for 70 switches at 85 USD, which comes out to about $1.22 per switch. The switch count is a little bit weird, but at 70 cents a switch, I'm not complaining too much. Now let's talk about the switch housing because this is easily the most mysterious aspect of the switch. Glorious says that the housing are polycarb for the top, PA66 nylon for the bottom, and uses original Ember tooling. Now, where have we heard that before? Now, the story that I'm aware of is that Drop originally claimed ownership of the only existing tooling of the Ember Pandas, and after repairs, used that on the initial run of the Drop Holy Pandas, which I call the V1s. Apparently, after that run, the tooling was too damaged to continue using, so they created a completely new set of molds that were then used in the most recent Drop Ember Panda and Holy Panda group buys. And I've verified those physical changes in my comparison review of the Drop Holy Panda V2s. So check it out if you haven't. Now this is where things get really confusing, but interesting at the same time. After comparing the Glorious Pandas to two different variants of the Drop Holy Pandas, I noticed that the housing that Glorious is producing looks nearly identical to the V1 Drop Holy Pandas, the switch produced from the first set of molds. They're both plate mount, The openings and clip points are the same, the patterns and plastic texture matches, and they even have the same mold numbers matching in location and typeface with only a couple noticeable differences. One is the new Glorious branding that is raised instead of sunken in like with the original Enver logo, and this burr here in front of the Switch, which could have something to do with how the new branding is added during the manufacturing process. Comparing the leaf design between the Glorious Panda and Drop Holy Pandas shows that they're pretty much identical as well. Now, the stem. This stem is in the center of all of the community backlash of the original name Glorious Holy Panda and why it was subsequently changed to Glorious Panda. Glorious has stated that this stem provides less pre-travel, a stronger upward stroke, and is made from palm sourced from Japan. When I first started typing on them, they felt nearly identical to the Holy Pandas, so I took a switch apart and created an overlay of the Halo stem over the Glorious stem. Now I'm going to preface this and say that with something as small as a stem, a macro shot comparison isn't the most precise since each slight perspective shift can skew the image. But from what I was able to capture, there is a striking similarity between the two stems with only a slight difference in the curve of the stem leg. This could explain why it's tighter at the top of the stroke, but with everything else looking pretty much the same, this could explain why the bump on this switch is pretty much indistinguishable to other Panda variants. So from what I can tell, it's not a straight clone like some people had guessed, but the profile is very, very close. I found that the claim of less pre-travel does seem to be accurate, as it does look and feel closer to the pre-travel profile of something like Azalea's V2, which is known for having the bump at the top. The difference in practice, however, is so hard to differentiate that you probably won't even be able to tell the difference between this and other Holy Panda switches in a blind test. The Glorious comes unlubed from the factory, and I was surprised to find that even in its unlubed state, they were noticeably smoother than the most recent V2 Holy Pandas from Drop. The difference is so apparent that if you do a blind test, you may not be able to tell the difference in the bump, but you will tell a difference on how smooth the stem interacts with the bottom housing. So how does Glorious Pandas compare to other Holy Panda variants? Well, in terms of pre-travel, it's nearly identical to the Yok Holy Trash Pandas, with both of these shorter than the V1 and V2 Drop Holy Pandas. In terms of the bump itself, the Glorious feels pretty much the same compared to all of the Panda variants. In terms of stem wobble, the Glorious falls into last place with Drop V1 and V2 being about the same, and Yok Holy Trash Pandas coming in first place. In terms of relative stiffness, Glorious seems to be stiffer than the V1 Drop Holy Pandas, and about the same with the Yok Holy Trash Panda and the V2 Drop Holy Pandas. Alright, so now it is time for a sound test, but before anyone complains, I haven't had a chance to prep my new custom keyboard yet, and you'll see why in a future video. So I'll still be using the Control-Alt again, but this time I've band-aid, clipped, and lubed the stabs. I've also have a polycarb keyboard coming in pretty soon, so just hold on a little bit longer for that. So after doing the sound test and using these switches for a couple weeks now, the Glorious switches do seem to sound a bit higher pitch than the Holy Panda V1s. And for people that are very particular about their switch sounds, will notice that the springs are a bit noisy and kind of remind me of the V2 Holy Pandas. You don't really notice it when you're playing with each individual switch, but when you fill out a complete board and start clacking away, it's pretty noticeable, especially on low profile keyboards like the Control-Alt, which ends up resonating some of that sound. What our ears perceive are much more sensitive than my recording equipment, but to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, here is a sound clip of the Yok Holy Trash Panda. And oh yeah, headphone warning, it's gonna be a bit loud. You hear the actuation on the slider and the leaf, but here's the Glorious Panda. On top of everything else, you can also hear the spring whine as well during actuation. For my testing, the Yok and V1 Drop Holy Pandas did not have the spring whine, but the Glorious and V2 drops did. Now, looping the switch does subdue the sound, but how well it works pretty much comes down to how consistent you are with the application in problematic areas of the spring, which I really haven't nailed down yet. But here's what a switch sounds like unlubed and lubed with 3203. Alright, so let's do a quick recap and close this video out. Ranking the Glorious against other Holy Pandas is a bit tricky because there's always so many things to consider and it's very easy to get caught up in the nuances. If we're talking about the best typing experience possible, I would rank the Yok Holy Trash Pandas as first, Glorious and V1 Holy Pandas trading for second and third, depending on if you care for a smoother switch or better sounding switch, and V2 Holy Pandas coming in last place. But if we were to look at the list and took pricing and availability into consideration, Glorious has a very distinct advantage. Yok Holy Trash Pandas require purchasing two different switch sets, with the Yok Pandas either being out of stock everywhere or selling for stupid high prices. So not only is it cost prohibitive to make, it's also generally not available. You can't even get the V1 Drop Holy Pandas anymore, and V2, well, those switches have their own set of problems. Looking at the other Holy Panda variants, it's easier to be critical of them because of their higher price per switch. If you're paying $1.20 per switch, they better be damn good. But at 70 cents per switch, you get a little bit more leeway, not to say that Glorious really needed it in this case. So in short, the Glorious Pandas provide a comparable tactile experience, and in some cases, a better experience than some true Holy Panda variants at a much lower price point. Now, I said pricing and availability is a distinct advantage, but not directly complementing Glorious quite yet, because the benefits that they're promising hasn't been fully realized yet. They're currently in the pre-order stage, and it looks like batch 1 shipment is still slated for early October, so we'll have to wait and see if Glorious can deliver on their promise. I'm personally cautiously optimistic because if they can pull this off, I can see these Glorious switches reaching a much wider audience, but we'll have to wait and see. Well, that's it for today. Like and subscribe. It really helps me out, and I will see you guys next time. Alright, so to show you guys how easy it is to tell the difference in smoothness with the Glorious Pandas, I have 5 Glorious Pandas and 5 Holy Pandas here. We're going to take all this, throw it into this black bag, and I'm just going to start pulling and guessing and seeing what switches they are. So put them in the bag, shake them up. Alright, so let's see. This one is drop. Yep, drop. Glorious. Yep, Glorious. Glorious. Drop. Drop. Yep. Glorious. Yep. Glorious. Yep. Drop. Yep. Glorious. Yep. Drop. And there's only one. Oh, there's 2 left. Okay, so. Glorious. Yep. And the last one is drop. So yeah, you can easily tell the difference. So there you go.